Okay, hello everyone. We should be coming in from the waiting area now that we started the meeting officially. We'll just give everyone one more second and then we will get underway. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Bailey Berlanti from ServeVita, Director of Business Development, and you are on the Central Command Summer 2025 webinar for July. Just as some quick housekeeping announcements before we go any further, this webinar is being recorded. The goal is to then be able to have that as a resource to pass around for anyone who may have missed the event or weren't able to attend at this time, and then we will make sure that that recording is emailed out to everyone that was registered post-event, and then a little bit delayed behind that immediate posting of the recording. We'll make sure that it gets posted to our YouTube, where you can then continue to share the links, rewatch, and hopefully continue to glean information that we're going to learn here today. All attendees are muted with cameras off, so you don't have to worry about interrupting the show. You can sit back, relax, and be ready to learn about web APIs this morning or afternoon, depending where on the globe you are. Use the Q&A tab or the chat to ask any questions. I'll be compiling those for the end of the presentation for our presenters. So feel free to ask. Don't worry if we don't get to it right away. We promise we will be covering them at the end of our hour together. Today's topic is going to be web APIs. Again, we're focusing this summer, the past few webinars on video help files of how we can kind of take the information and documentation that exists about Central Command and make that a video presentation and a little bit more engaging. Today, we've got two presenters. We actually have Danny Eldridge back for our webinar presentation. We're giving Michael the break for the month. President of ServeVita, and he will be presenting on web APIs. And we also have a special guest, Chris Lewis, the managing director at Travelogix, and he has also brought along his friend Adam to be able to be a part of this conversation today. So a quick agenda overview, and then I'll pass it over to our presenters. We're going to cover introductions of Danny, Chris, and Adam real quick, and then we will get into the topic of web APIs, covering an introduction to APIs, how to set up web APIs in Central Command, what APIs are available in Central Command, and then covering our case study of how we can use APIs for connecting to great applications and solutions in the travel industry like Travelogix Analytix. So I'll pass it over to Danny to go ahead and start off the introductions, and we'll get underway.
Perfect. Thanks, Bailey. Most of you know who I am. I'm Danny Eldridge, the president of ServeVita, also oversee the ServeVita team. Basically, I'm one of the team members as well, so I'm involved in some of the consulting that our team does from that standpoint. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Chris Lewis. I'm one of the founders and the managing director, as Bailey said, at Travelogix here in the UK. We are a data management company specializing in the development and delivery of data solutions for travel management companies. And we have been integrated with the web APIs in Central Command for the last couple of years. So it'll be our pleasure to show you what we do and how all the benefits of the API and everything we've done.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so overview of the agenda. We're going to walk through, do a quick introduction to APIs and what they are. We're going to kind of do a level set. I know we have different users and technical expertise on the call, so we're going to try to walk through this from a basic concept and then build up. We'll walk through how they're set up. We're going to talk about what's available from Central Command /Unit 4 APIs, and we'll kind of provide you a list of what those look like. And then we're going to talk about how we've used the APIs as an example of how you could use the APIs to extract data or even update data within the Unit 4 application. And then we'll end with a little demo of the Travelogix Analytics tool, and then open the floor up for Q&A. As always, if we're going through this, you have a question, please raise your hand or ask through the Q&A tool. Bailey will interrupt us and basically ask the question if it's applicable to that, or she might text you back and say, hey, I'll get to that at the end. but as we're going through it. So we'll just kick it off here. So introduction to APIs. What is an API? An API is a mechanism to enable two software components to communicate to each other using a set definitions and protocols. So basically, it allows two applications to talk to each other and share information. One might update the other, one might pull data from another. And so, from that standpoint, an API just allows the ability to pass data between two applications. It replaces the ability to use like flat files. In the CentralCommand application, we use things like, a flat file or CSV file to hand data off to, iBank or Cornerstone, or to Graphs reporting or Prism or AirPlus. An API can replace all that. In order to do that, both applications need an API integration, and then it usually needs somebody to build the communication or connection between the two. What does API stand for? It stands for Application Programming Interface. It refers to any software with a distinct function. Interface is thought of as a contract of service between two applications. So basically, an API is the contract or the application programming interface. And again, normally you need a middleware to say, hey, I'm sending data over there. That format or that API is in this format. Oh, I need to send, do something else over here. To put it in there, I need to reformat it, because normally APIs between two softwares very rarely line up to say, okay, this is, we use the same names, and I'll show you what we mean by that as we go through this demonstration, to give you an example. How do APIs work? Again, API architecture is usually explained in terms of a client and a server. The client is what's requesting, and the server is what's responding to it. From that perspective, okay. The APIs we're going to talk about today are called REST APIs. There's a number of different APIs. There's SOAP, or there's REST. REST is a lot more easy to deal with and flexible, and is pretty much the standard for most of the APIs that Unit 4 creates. So they're just a little bit of a little easier to deal with than a SOAP, and the handoff and the request acts very much more easier than more of the advanced API capabilities, other APIs in the market. From that standpoint, I'm not going to get into those. So let's walk into how you set up an API with Unit 4. So the number one is you got to configure and set up the API in the management console. So we're going to walk through that step by step. You need to create users and permissions. You need to test the access as soon as that's done. APIs can be tested in two tools. One comes with the Unit 4 application. It's called Swagger. And the second one is an off-the-shelf software called Postman. And we'll kind of show you those two things, and I can talk about that in a little bit as we go through the presentation. Okay. Configuring the management console. Again, Unit 4 gives you an easy way of doing it. There is a wizard that you can use to apply it. So you go into the management console. You're going to right-click on the web, default web, and it's going to bring up an add capability. I did have a screenshot on it. I'm not sure where it went. But then it creates this wizard, and then basically you walk through the wizard. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to click next. After the first thing, you're going to select Web API, and then you're going to create the API name that you want to use. Click next. You're going to give it the folder structure where you're going to install that Web API, and then again click next. And again, it's a wizard. You're going to give it an application pool name, which gets registered in Microsoft Internet Services. So you create that from that standpoint. You're going then give it a username, so you can use it like a built-in application, or you can create your own user account for security purposes, depending on your internal processes and security protocols. You're going to select, you have the ability to select HTTP or HTTPS. We obviously recommend HTTPS. And at that point, when you click next, you're going to insert or create your certificate or use your certificate that's going to be used for that secured server. So, from a protocol perspective, if you were setting this up and not publishing it to the broader internet, and you're going to just set it up and utilize it internally without any, public access, then you could use HTTP. Again, normally when you're setting this up, you want other third parties to access these APIs, and you need to set that up. So the next step is, as soon as you're done that, you're just going to click finish. So again, once you click finish, the next step that happens is you're going to have the item show up in your management console. In this case, we did it under our demo environment, and you're going to have a web API under the default website. And what you're going to do next is you're going to come down here to protocol, and you're going to click on the protocol, and it's going to open up in the main screen in the management console, and then you can click test. And what that'll do is that'll show you, that'll open up what we call Swagger, which is it's off-shelf top software that Unit 4 embedded into their web API capability, and it gives you a nice user interface to the web API documentation. Now, you can run the services normally without Swagger, and you can see all the services. It's not a graphical interface of that. You will not be able to use these services because the next step in the process is setting up the user access to the application. So again, this just gives you, is the site accessible? Is it using HTTPS? Can I see the web services? And I'll get into the list of those in just a minute. Okay, so once you've configured the access in the management console, the next step is to create users and access. So just the good thing about one of the advantages of the web API setup is it uses a user in Unit 4 just like any other user. So just like a user that's set up to go into the application and use the application through the interface, whether it's the web interface or the desktop, the user created for web API comes with all the same security levels. So things like data control, what menus, web API menus they get access to. So the first thing is you need to set up a role. That role would be just a dedicated role that you would give access to the public web APIs. And it's separate from your other roles, so you don't use, your system admin role or your finance role or your BSP ARC, consultant role. You would create a new role for this is recommended. After you create the role, you're going to move into creating the user. And again, it's just like any other user. You create the user, you give them menu access as the under the usage. You don't give them administration or workflow. They don't need that. They're just looking for the ability to access the public APIs from the application. So number 2 is to set up the user, give it a password under security. That's going to be very important a little later in this process. The next thing you need to do is create that user as a web service account. So there's the user that is set up as the user in the Unit 4 user master file has to be the same. So the ID and the name need to be the same as the user ID that's set up in the application. So that has to be a one-to-one. The second thing is in the secret, when you set up your web service account, the secret is the user password that you set up on the user master file. So those two need to tie out Okay, and what this does, this enables the system to identify this user as the ability to access the web APIs, is what it does. So again, a critical step in the process to make sure that the user is set up, has access to it from that perspective. After you've done that, and again, I've shown you all of these screens. The web service account is only available in the in the web. So you have to have your web unit for web set up to access the web service account screen. The rest of these accounts, your roles, your user master file, and the public API is all actually available through the desktop. So, you know, again, you're still going to need the web in order to set up the web service account capability within the application, which should be pretty standard in any of the installs or updates that you're doing today. Create it, you know, so you can use it. Public access, again, underneath the menu access, user access, capabilities and system admin, you're going to open up that, you're going to go into public access, and you're going to give this user access only to the public APIs that they need access to, okay? So if they need access to CentralCommand, then you're going to give them access to the CentralCommand, and that'll give them access to everything that's under the CentralCommand menu. If you want them to have access to, you know, system admin to create users, you know, send data to create users, then you can do that as well. You can, some other considerations which we'll get into in just a second, but you know, once you create that user and give them access to those APIs, then they're only going to be able to call or see those APIs when they go into the Swagger site. It'll minimize that data. Okay. Some other considerations that come along with it is data control. Data control basically restricts the data element that people have access to. You can actually set that up in the data control screen. You can actually tag it to only apply to web API items. So if we want to say, you know, for example, with Travelogix, if we wanted to say, Travelogix, you only have access to these customer IDs whenever you query the data through the web API, just like a user going in and using the desktop browser or the, you know, the web information browser, and we say, hey, you can only see these customers, that security applies over top of the, is used also for the web API. So you can restrict it. So if we're extracting data for Travelogix, we can say Travelogix only can pull data for these 10 customers. We can set up the data control for that so that they are only pulling from those customers from the system. Object access, there is one of the, and I'll show it to you in briefly here in a second, one of the categories in the web API is what we call objects. The cool thing about objects is you can create your own. You know, you can create like a view within Unit 4. You could create a balance table. You could create a browser template in Unit 4. And then there's a step that you create that object as a user-defined object. It knows where it's pulling the data from. And then you can set that when you configure that as a web API. And when you do that, it basically enhances your ability to create your own API data sets to share. So if somebody comes back to you and says, hey, I need this information, or we're going to pass this information off to, you know, a profile tool, or we want to bring in data from a profile tool, you can create your own objects to manage that data exchange between the systems. So you're not limited in regards to, oh, there's the API list, that's all I'm limited to. Absolutely not. And when you create those objects, just so you know, an object basically is just a field, all the data fields, it's a table of data that you want to share with your third party or another application, okay? From that standpoint, after you've set it up, you're going to test this. I'm going to show you two things here. I'm going to kind of switch over to my screen. So just give me a second here to switch. Okay. All right. And if you can see this, you should be able to see Postman. Bailey, can you give me the thumbs up if it's refreshed?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. This is Postman and this is Swagger. Okay, Swagger and Postman are a little different in regards to how they work. Swagger comes with the unit for application. Once you identify the URL and you share that URL out from that perspective, it'll automatically populate Swagger in from a unit 4 perspective. Postman, you go in and you create your environment and create your items. So let's just go into here. I'm going to show you an example of a couple things. So let's go to objects, and here's the list of objects that I talked about. Underneath objects, we have all the travel type of objects. So we have, just let me scroll down here to T's, EQRST, all right, and we have, travel agents, travel air segments, travel all segments, travel arrival and departure details, travel auxiliary bookings, okay? And underneath each one of these, we have the schema that you can pull the data in. So if I go underneath invoice items, for example, and I expand that, it's going to show me, here's all the fields that I can pull from the system. So I want, transaction date, time of transaction, branch ID, travel document, the travel document number, transaction number, state, booking GDS, your agent information, there's payment information, including their payment amounts. Underneath this one, ticket information is underneath the invoice items. So everything that's basically in your invoice table is available through this. Including the segment numbers and, some address information, contact information, and last update. If there's related values to that transaction number, then that will pull the related values as well. And then any custom fields, any flexi fields that you have, it'll actually pull those in based on the customer field level, group level. So a good example of this, just to throw out an example, would be customer, customers. You create customers, and you create in that customer, you create the flexi field tables for service fee amounts. Again, there's an update to customers and there's a get from customers. And when you see get, that is pull data, okay? There is another term that you basically post the data from or update data in an API. And I'll show you just an example of that in just a second. So if I put my customer ID in here as T, okay, and then I can put a filter by, and I can use a transaction date. There is a certain syntax that we use, and I'll show you that in just a minute, that you can use to do this. You can use a limit, so a 10, I want to bring back 10. And basically, if you click try it, I'm not going to do it in here. It takes a little longer in Swagger. Just be aware of that. If I say try it out, it's going to return my data set, okay? The similar same thing happens with our friend here in Postman. What we can do underneath this, just so you know, if you're interested, we will send an email to Bailey or reach out to Bailey. We can extract this Postman library. We can extract it for you and send it to you. Those familiar with Postman usually know how to do that and send that data to you so you can have that information, okay? Similar, in Postman, you have an authorization that you have to set up and put in the username and password that you're using, and then your filters that you want to set up. And basically all you need to do is click send, and that's going to go out. It's going to request the data from 2022-01-15, transaction 10, transaction numbers, and this client that we're using. So this is the company ID from Unit 4. So these are standard, these are always the same for each one of these is going to have the same requirements, or what we call query parameters. And I can show, we're going to provide a link in this application, or in the PowerPoint, so you can use that link, or we can actually post it. I'll post it in. So this returns my data set. So now I have company ID, customer number, date of issue, my exchange information. I have my agent information that I'm pulling, my payment information, payment amounts information, your ticket information, okay, all the way down through segment, number, series, last updated. There's no relation or customer groups, custom field groups on this one. And so now I'm into my second transaction. So then I'm into my next transaction number, and basically it's presenting the data set in what we call a JSON file format, okay? And again, what we do is we hand that off, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes here. We hand that off. Travelogix takes it, they consume it, they do the mapping from the JSON into their database, and then basically they can report on it. Again, any third-party application, you can hand that data off, okay? For a list of, I just gotta go back to my PowerPoint here for a second. Let me just move it over. A second, get that out of the way. Okay, so what I want to do next is I want to go through the list of all the APIs that are available. So within CentralCommand, there is a number of items. We have items for adjustments. So you have all your adjustment details, adjustment financial history adjustments, your tax details. You have segments. So we have all the segment information, including all travel segments. You know, so we have one query that you can run to pull back all of that. Again, you use your query items here to query that data. All right. And again, you can see, if you go into Swagger, you'll be able to see the format, you know, what is returned in regards to that. And we'll flip over to that in just a second. You know, fixed register information. So again, if we want to extract fixed register information, branches, air carrier codes, agents, travel customers, travel vendors, your travel vendor queries. That's a custom one that we created. So suppliers, accounting customers, so GDS agents, IATA agents. Again, you know, from IATA locations, I mean. So you got all of those data elements, or you know, structures to pull. Transaction detail, invoice items, FOP history, invoice, remarks, your UDID parse data table, your TUD data table with all your bar charts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can extract those through the API. So it's pretty extensive. On the interface, you can do, you know, you can pull your validation rule errors. So if you wanted to, hey, I want to display those in, that's a good case scenario. If I want to display my validation rule errors in, let's say, an agent desktop, not a problem. You can pull the errors, and it's going to show you all those errors that are showing up in the error, you know, your error correction screen. So when you go in there, you'll be able to see, here's all my errors. ArcBSP, you know, spoiled tickets. And then the latest one we have is the CentralCommand TWK-PNR. Okay, and what that allows you to do, it's an API. I'm going to minimize this and go back to our Swagger here for a second. And I'm going to talk a little bit about these. But this one here is a post, P-O-S-T, a post. And what this allows you to do is post a transaction into Unit 4. Okay, so this basically, it replaces the parser, is basically what you're doing here. One of the things you need to be aware of is we do validate this data through the API. So when you send the data to the API, if it doesn't meet all the rules required for all the fields, then it's gonna send you back an error from the application. But basically, it's broken down based on what we call our working table structure. So again, if you have a third party, we built this out for Partial 2.0 development is what it was originally built for. Again, you can use it yourself and allows you to create a transaction in CentralCommand. The great thing about this is when you use this post CentralCommand-TWK, again, it's going to go through data load. So basically what this is doing is replacing the parser that does the parsing of the GDS files into an XML and then importing those XML into the TWK tables. We're bypassing that and you're just taking the data directly into the CentralCommand working table. So again, if you're working with an NDC provider, you can work along with them and say, okay, we got an API, I need you to send that data to the API and import that data. Obviously, you want to be very careful about that when you're working with it. The rules that a lot of those NDC providers use makes it complicated, meaning they'll send you a file for every change. You don't want that happening in this scenario. You're going to want to work with them to say, okay, I just want the final invoice that's coming across, or if there's an exchange or a refund or whatnot. So, we don't handle changes that great right now within the CentralCommand application when we need to update, like, for example, UDID information. If there's a UDID change, we're not great on that, something on the product plan to move forward. Okay, so again, this is very handy to do that. Again, some of the other ones I want to highlight, attribute values. So you have attribute values. There is another level here. So there's a Swagger version 2. When you get into Swagger version 2, and let me do Explorer here. When you get into that version, it takes some minutes to load here. We got the ability to update, post attribute values. So if you have another system that, like, for example, let's say Salesforce, and you're sending over data from Salesforce, right? We have an ability to do, attribute values. So if you have certain relations that you've set up that you're creating those values in Salesforce and sending them over, no problem. We can import those attribute values using the post. Okay, patch. All right, from that standpoint. I'm going to go back to here for a second. This is going to take a little longer to load, but we have an ability to do a post for customers as well. So, from that standpoint, there's a lot of information available through that tool. All right, let me go back to the PowerPoint. Give me a second here. I'm going to stop sharing that and go back to our PowerPoint here. And hopefully it starts at the right spot. Okay, let me just flip through here real quick. Okay, we've covered the web BIs that are available. There's common, system admin, all modules, CentralCommand, and you create your own user-defined objects. All right. Additional reference resources that are available for you. You can reach out to us, or you can go to Community for You. There's a great resource called the Developers Reference Application Programming Interfaces for Unit 4 Business World 7.5. And it walks through how you use how you use those different parameters, query parameters. It's great. If you want to use the CentralCommand TWK web API, there's a user guide PDF, and that's included in your 7.6 installation package. And then the queries where you see select and filter and offset, okay, those are all based on a standard by OData. If you go to, and this is provided in the application developers reference. If you go to that website, it will show you how to use those filters. So how do I filter on a transaction based on the last transaction update? So it's a very handy tool. It'll provide you, hey, here's the syntax you need to use for all of those, is what it's going to do. Okay. What I want to do now is we're going to walk into the case study side of this. An example of how we've used API with Travelogix. So we had a business case Travelogix was selected as the reporting tool for e-business travel in the Netherlands. And we needed to export data to them and provide that data so that they can do the, so that they could do their analysis and provide their tool as analysis. What happened with that was we had a great conversation with Chris and his team and his development team. And instead of doing a flat file, we said, hey, let's use the Unit 4.8 web APIs, skip the flat file. The web APIs are always available and they can extract the data on a daily basis. So in order to do that, we sat down and we figured out what do we need to do in order to make this work. So what happens is on the Travelogix side, there's an action, that starts with a request for transactions. We use what we call a GET request, and we filter based on the last update. So basically they say, give me all the data based on the last update date being today or yesterday. All right, we provide a response of that data. So we provide the response with a one of the things in an API is that select statement, so they can say, I only want the transaction number, the transaction number, and maybe the PNR. So basically, in the response, we respond to them with here's all the transaction numbers and PNRs that have a last update of yesterday. They consume that, create a list, and then send another GET request to Unit 4, to the API, and they say, okay, give us all this information. Give us the invoice item, segment, and remarks for these transactions. And we want all the data. We want all the invoice item data, we want all the segment data, and we want all the remarks for this list of transactions. We then turn around and provide a response of all that data, and that goes into the Travelogix database, at which point they can consume it, okay? So what's the result of that? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna hand this over to Chris now, and he's kind of gonna walk us through the Travelogix tool to kind of show, hey, here's our reporting, here's a reporting tool that we partnered with, and what it can do for you. So Chris, I hand it over to you.
All right, thanks, Danny. Really appreciate that. So, ladies and gents, good afternoon or good morning once again, wherever you are in the world. So, just to reintroduce myself, my name's Chris, one of the directors at Travelogix, and I'm going to take you through our platform as a case study of the use of the CentralCommand and Unit 4 web API. So as Danny said, we made the decision to work with the web API basically through the fact that it is more efficient, it's a more modern way of us pulling data, and we have a lot more control over what and when we can pull. So if we want to pull data every 10-15 minutes or live or once a day, once a week, we can do that. So we have a lot more flexibility around what we want to pull and when we want to pull it. But what I'd love to do is kind of give you an introduction into our platform and show you how that data eventually looks once it comes into our platform. So what you can see on your screen right now is our Analytix sign-in screen. Our Analytix platform is an online data reporting platform that we provide to travel management companies and who then pass that platform on to their customers so that they can show them the value of the TMC, what they've spent, missed saving opportunities, and all of their data metrics relating to their travel program. And we also have in here all of our duty of care application as well. And all of that is powered by the data that we pull from the TMC and in particular from the CentralCommand API. So when a user comes to our platform, they'll have their own username and password. And when they log into the platform, the first place that they're going to be taken to is what we call their default dashboard. And a user can have as many dashboards as they like, they can have as many reports as they like, and they can have as many reports on as many dashboards as they like. So the system's very, very flexible in terms of what can be presented. The dashboards can be presented with two parts. At the top here, you've got what we call widgets or fast reports. And widgets or fast reports can be pulled in from a library that we have within the platform. And the purpose is to give the recipient or the viewer of this data a top level view of the numbers that matter most to them. So one of the examples here is that we can set up a widget at the top here, which is a budget-based widget. So I can see that this particular customer has a €4 million budget. All of the data that we've pulled from Central Command tells us that this particular customer has spent 1.1 million euros in the period that we're reporting on, meaning that they've spent 28% of their annual budget. And then the rest of the data that we've pulled from Central Command will then show us things like emission budget. So if you had a customer who was particularly interested in emissions and they wanted to bring in emission budgeting, we can do that. We can build in equivalencies to show how the equivalent of equivalence of CO2 based on how far you may have driven a family car, or even averages around the kilos of CO2 that have been emitted on average per kilometer traveled on your program. And then we can pull things in here. For example, it's a bit late in the day today, so in the UK, so my rail travelers and air travelers are all departed and traveled, but we could see here how many air and rail departures we have for the rest of the day. I've got 1 hotel check-in today, and I've got 31 active travelers around the world somewhere. So all of this, again, is all pulled and based on the data that we get from the mid-back office and from Central Command. Now, at this point, if I want to see more information about any of these metrics, I can click. So, for example, if I wanted to see more information around these 31 travelers, I can click and the system will go away and get me all of the travelers that are active right now and all of their itinerary data. So we're not just getting those top level numbers from Central Command, we're pulling all of the granularity of the data that's in every single record to then compile the data at this lower level in our platform. So straight away I could come into here and I could say I want to sort this drill down by passenger or account or transaction type. I could scroll to the right here to see more information about how long this passenger is away for, the routing they've taken, the class of travel that they've traveled on. And what we can also do is pull what we call UDF data, but you might commonly within your businesses call this UDF data or UDID data or DI data, but it's basically the point of sale information that we grab from the passenger or the booker. So we can get here a cost center, an approver, a department, an employee ID. But we can grab these at the point of sale, we can grab as many of these as are required, and we can name these on a customer by customer basis. So if customer A calls cost center a cost center, but customer B calls it shoe size, we can do that. We can handle that and display to the customer exactly what they want to see or what they are used to seeing in their data based on the terminology they use. And then we've got a further level of granularity. So if we want to see here more information about EMEA's booking, we can click. And the system will go away and get more information about that record. Again, all of this being pulled from the Central Command platform. We'll get how many passengers on this trip with EMEA, their record references, their booking date, invoice number, ticket number, etc. We'll get a full review of the sectors that they've booked on this particular flight, along with a base fare and tax breakdown and a few more of those UDID or DI lines that we grab at the bottom. Now, the intelligence in our platform will also allow us to bridge bookings together. So if you've got a booking here for EMEA, but in a separate folder or a separate P&R or a separate reservation altogether, you might have a hotel, a car hire, a ferry, theatre tickets, whatever you might have. Our system can string those together with the relationships that are built into Central Command, and again, that we pull from the API. So if we go here and we say view booking details, the system will go away and grab every single item that can be bridged together from the various bookings that EMEA might have throughout the TMCs booking platforms. So for example, we can see here that EMEA has got a flight from London to Paris. They're staying at the Novotel. They have a Europe car here, a car rental, and at the bottom they've got their return flight. Now straight away, what we can also do is we can get an aggregate trip cost. So not just now the cost of the flight, but the cost of everything that the passenger has booked on the reservation. How long they're away for, and a compiled CO2 value, so an aggregate CO2 value, and an audit trail of all of the invoices or credit notes that may have been issued on this reservation or series of reservations in the mid-back office or Central Command platform. And we can continue to look at all of these items record by record. We can drill down into many different levels. We can also export this data. So when the data has come to us and we've done all the cleansing, we will allow you to take that data out of our platform. So everything that is in Central Command can be exported from Central Command via our platform as well. And we can grab that out for you in CSV or Excel. You can create your own customized exports if you want to, and you can add and remove columns to this view. You can manage filters. So there's way more data behind this than we're just showing you on the screen. If I head back to my dashboard, what we've also then got is the second part of our dashboard. So we've seen the widgets at the top there. The second part of the dashboard that we have is what we have down here, which are the reports. And these are just some standard reports that we've built into this particular demo set for today. But you might have, you could have in here whatever you choose. But in here, I've got my air class of travel breakdown, my top travelers, my top destinations, advanced purchase analysis. We could have CO2, online adoption, etc., in here. And all of this is interactive. So again, we can hover over all of these elements and get a little bit more information about these line items. And then if we want to see more information on a particular report, we can click on the report name, and that will take us to what we call the report view. And the report view will give you a bit more information or a larger version of that report. And as per usual in a demo, it's decided to run a little slow, but we're used to that. So normally these screens will come back in 2 or 3 seconds, but I think I've just got a bit of a Wi-Fi issue here today. So in here, what we've basically got is the larger format of the report. So we can hover over each of these elements and get a little bit more information about the top line numbers. At the bottom here, we have a report breakdown, and this will basically show you the bottom line numbers that make up the chart above, with some metrics around trends year on year, month on month, quarter on quarter, where appropriate. And then over here, we have a comments and observations area. And in here, you can manually enter those comments and observations, or you can use our integrated AI model, which will go away and automatically analyze a data set for you based on who you are, whether you're an agent or whether you are a customer. It will look at the nuance of your profile, of your travel trends, and will give you 3,500 characters of analysis based on what is in this report. And this can be updated every single time you look at a report. But the idea here is that you no longer need to be a data analyst in order to get to the detail or be able to tell a story with your data. When it comes to building dashboards in our platform, we can do that in a number of different ways. But the most common way that we tend to see people using it now is using our template library. So you could go ahead and build your own template from scratch if you want to. We'll just give you a blank canvas and you choose what to apply there. Once you've built your templates, you can put those into an agency library. So all of your account managers, you can be assured, are sharing data with their customers in a consistent manner. Or you can use the templates that we give you out of the box as part of the platform. So in here, I've just got 8 examples, everything from an account management overview down to a sustainability overview. But if I wanted to, I could use these templates as they are out of the box, or I could adapt them and save them as an agency template and share those with my customer. So I'm going to say here, I want to go ahead and run an account management overview. I can now come into here and choose all of the criteria that I want to apply to this particular overview. So I could say I want to run this for my Lavender Limited and Rose Group accounts. I want to limit results further by suppliers, maybe by individual travelers, so we can create individual dashboards for individual travelers. We can limit results further by selecting origins, destinations, individual transaction types. We can normalize currency that we pull from Central Command back to a neutral unit of currency. So if you have an agency online that has multiple different offices around the world, all issuing invoices in different currencies, we can normalize those back again based on the engine, or pulling the data from Central Command, but using our currency engine to normalize all of that. And then we could say whether we want to include or exclude exchange tickets or whatever we might want to do there. Then down here, we can choose our date ranges, and we can choose our date ranges from what we call here dynamic dates. So these are pre-built date ranges that we have built into the platform. Or you can switch those off and use calendar selections. It's entirely up to you. And then down at the bottom here, based on the profile that I'm running or the profile I've chosen to take on board, I can now limit the results further by those UDIDs or UDFs, the cost centers, approvers, shoe size, hair color, whatever it might be. As soon as I hit go, the system will go away and grab that data set. It will create that data set using the conditions that I've selected, and will go ahead and fulfill all of the reports that I have in that template and present that data to me. Now at this point, I could save that as it is. I could add or remove reports or widgets from this view. I can move these elements around, and I could say I want to view this chart as a table rather than a pie chart, for example. And I can adapt this to however I want it to be displayed. But once I'm happy, I can save. I'm going to call this sample for CC. I'm going to save this into my client's dashboard folder. Oh, I've already got one called that, a central command. Save my dashboard, and that's it. That dashboard is now live and will be updated every single time we take data from Central Command. So whether that's every 5 minutes or every 24 hours, every single time a user looks at this dashboard, they can be assured that what they're seeing is the latest data set that we have available from Central Command. Now I could share this with a departmental head, and when they look at this dashboard, they can use these dashboard points to analyze the data sets they're in. So if they wanted to see, for example, here, I want to analyze this £201,000 worth of data, click, and the system will go away and analyze that part of the data set for me. It will show me now the CO2 for that data, when those invoices were raised, the volume of invoices raised on certain months, and we could continue to add filters to this. So I could say, bring back the airline that has made the most bookings. I want to see all of the bookings that have been made on British Airways, where the advanced purchase is within 8 days. And the system will keep drilling down and keep drilling down until we end up with a single element or a single transaction. But what you can see there is we've applied all those filters at the top here, and in 3 clicks we've gone from a £421,000 data set down to an £18,000 data set. And we could choose to remove these filters, update and save these filters, share that data with Danny because he's my head of department, whoever it might be, or I could reset all the filters and start again. And then the final part that I'm going to show you today of our platform, again, all powered by the data that we pull in from Central Command, is our Geo platform. And this will basically show you the location of your travelers based on the passive tracking of the itinerary data that we pull from Central Command or your GDS or online booking tool or whatever we integrate with. So by default, we will show you where your travelers are now, but we could say I want to see all of my travelers for the next week, the next month, the next 6 months, whatever it might be. We could choose to say, show me travelers that are on the move right now or are in destination or a combination of both. And again, we can limit the results by accounts, individual travelers or suppliers or airlines. And then when we basically see this map, what we will see is we will see all of our places dotted around the map and clustered into locations. Where we see locations pulsing like this, that means that we have at least one active traveler in that location. So an active traveler is on the move right now. All other locations here, everybody is static. So you can see here in mainland Europe, the main majority of people are static because it's a little later on in the evening and nobody's really moving. But in the UK, it's pretty much rush hour here, so there's plenty of people moving around. So we can keep drilling down and drilling down all the way down to a metropolitan level until we start to be shown individual places. So for example, right now at London Heathrow, over the period of time that I've selected, I have one active traveler, one inactive traveler, and one future traveler. If I want to view them, I can view, and I can see those clustered together or broken down as active, inactive, and future. And I can view their itineraries. And again, all of this information will be coming directly from the mid-back office, from Central Command. Excuse me. And I can choose to export this data, analyze it further. And what we can also do, if I go back to the map here, if I want to see more information about a particular country or the people I have there, I can click on a country. I can get all of the country profile information, any security alerts that are active for today in the last 30 days, and all of my travelers and their information that we have pulled from that mid-back office platform. And I won't go into it in too much detail, but we also have the ability to disseminate out alerts from here. So you could request alerts to be sent to travel managers or account managers, and the system will automatically deliver alerts based on risk and associated to where you have travelers. So whilst this is a bit of a demonstration of our platform, hopefully it's a good example of what can be achieved using the data that we can pull from CentralCommand via the API. Danny, does that cover everything you were expecting?
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks for doing that. Appreciate it greatly. Again, yep. It's a great tool, and we're excited. One of the things I wanted to add, so everybody was aware of, the integration between Travelogix and CentralCommand is built. The only thing, if you were interested in Travelogix and reaching out to Chris and his team, that we would have to do to extract the data from CentralCommand is basically configuring the Unit 4 environment like we walked through earlier today. Here, let's configure the APIs, let's create the Travelogix users with the password, and then basically give them access to the those APIs that they need that they're currently using. And then they've already have the APIs built, and they'll work with you to determine, okay, I'm pulling these remarks, what these remarks go into those buckets that Chris talked about. So again, it's easy peasy from a development standpoint. It's no development required on the CentralCommand side. It's kind of out of the box functionality that's available today. So just, you know, from that standpoint.
I know we're starting to run low on time. We do have 2 questions. I know Danny answered them in the Q&A chat, but I just wanted to make sure for those that maybe watch back on the recording that we get them, and also make sure that anyone else on the recording or on the meeting know about them. The first question was, can you enter multiple filters, and then how would that syntax work? So Danny, for APIs, what's the answer?
Absolutely. On the filter fields, when you have in the string, when you have the $sign filter, you would use the your first criteria, and then you can use an and or an or. So so you could basically put an and between the 2 fields that you want to filter on. So an example I posted in the Q&A is price get GT is get $20 or greater than price greater than 20 and category equal to electronics. So if you wanted last update and business unit or customer ID, you would do last update equals, and then do category equals or customer ID equals, and then put the values in. So an and or an or will work on multiple, and you could have multiples. You could run that string as far as you want to.
Perfect. And then the second question was, I would like to add values to an existing Flexi field table. Is there a standard object or query that facilitates the upload, or do we have to create our own objects?
No, there's a standard. The Flexi fields are normally tied to an attribute within the application. So for example, customer and vendor have a post capability. Attribute values also has a post capability, which is when you upload, or you would use a patch, what they call patch, which is an update. And you can, in both of those, there is an ability to include the Flexi field data. So you just have to use one of those, similar to when we walked through the CentralCommand one, it had the data in there as well.
Okay. Thank you. Like I said, we're running up on the hour. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you for attending. We'll work on making sure that the recording goes out after this call, and I will make sure that in the release of the next newsletter for CentralCommand, we have the upcoming topics. You can get information. I'll make sure to pass it on to connect with Chris and Adam and the Travelogix team if you're interested in hearing more. We'll make sure that you get their information included as well with the recording. So looking forward to seeing everybody on the next monthly webinars, and thank you, Chris and Adam, for being here today to help us go through these web APIs.
Thanks, guys. Awesome. Appreciate your time. Good to meet you all.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.